Thank you so much. Thank you, IPR, for having me to present my research interest about internal communication. And the reason I want to brought up this topic is not just it is my research interest, but more than that, I believe this topic itself is so important from the aspect of professionals as well. So today I'm going to talk about the role of internal communication, especially in the context of transformations. So speaking of transformations, we can come up with many contexts. The cultural transitions, the change of leadership, the change of the work format. Speaking of the remote work, if not all of us have experienced that, I believe most of us have experienced that. So there are a lot of change contexts. And if you can think of what are, if not number one, but it must be the backbone factors to facilitate the whole process of transformation, that should be effective internal communication. And that's why I want to bring up this for today's topic. And specifically, just because speaking of change, speaking of transformation, there are so many contexts, I want to mainly focus on the context about remote work. Number one, this is like one of the top one things that most of us are experiencing right now. And number two, most of the strategies, the tactics that can be applied to this context can be applied to many other contexts. So I was just mainly using the remote work as the context for today's sharing. So here is just like a transition for the remote work. Briefly share the four stages. Pre-COVID, remote work is pretty like a rarity. It's not a very common thing for most of us. And all of a sudden, during the pandemic, we have to do the remote work. We have no options. And then at a later stage, even though health-wise, we can go back to work. But still, many companies, especially those tech companies, they still have those remote work options as a way to attract and retain talents just because they think people might like that options. But now, if you realize recently, there are increasing trends or more and more companies, they kind of realize the downside of having people work like everywhere. You can name many negative effects like the low productivities, the lack of engagement, the negative workplace culture, the disconnection with the leaders within the team, etc. The challenges can go on and on. So now many companies are requesting their employees return to the office. It's not a gentle nudge. It's more like you have to come back, otherwise you leave. So with that being said, what do you think? Do people like it? Question mark. Okay, I already saw some people were not for me. So before we share more research interest, I want to present some findings from some of the most recent industry reports. So this is a pretty recent research from the Pew Research Center, and the data was comparing the findings from March 2023 to I believe 1 year before, which is January 2022. So as you can tell, the percent of the people who are fully remote work decreased from 43% to 35%. And the percent of people who are doing hybrid work are increasing from 35% to 41%. So it seems like over the past year, full-time remote workers is decreasing and more people are doing the hybrid work, which I believe many of our guests here are kind of experiencing the same transitions. And this is the data from McKinsey in 2022 June with over 11,000 participants. And when they asked about what are your most important factors to motivate you to look for a new job opportunities, here are some main reasons behind that. Not surprisingly, looking for a greater pay and looking for better career opportunities are still the top two reasons. But the number three most important reason is about they want the flexible working environment. That is the top 3 factors that motivate people or encourage people to look for a new career. And from the same resource, this one shows some interesting findings. So even though it seems like people want to have the flexible work models, but also people share the hybrid work model is the most challenging work models. Or comparing to the fully remote work, or comparing to the fully in-person or on-site workers. The hybrid models is the #1 factors that made people to feel all those obstacles when they are working across all the factors, including mental health, physical health, the ability to grow yourself, look for personal development, and access to work, access to resources. Across all the factors, people who are doing hybrid work experience the most obstacles, followed by fully remote work, and then followed by on-site workers. So even though we need more research to dig deeper behind the reasons, behind the things, why is that? Maybe people who are doing hybrid workers are the ones who are experiencing all those challenges, so they opt for the hybrid work, or it's because they are doing hybrid work, so they are like doubly exposed to all the challenges within each of the settings. We don't know the exact reasons behind that yet. But the thing we can know is people want to do hybrid work, but at the meantime, hybrid work can bring most factors or challenges for the workers. So what can we do? So this is the study, a very recent one from Forbes, released in 2023, September. And this study, they surveyed over 1,000 companies' decision makers regarding what's their current policies about asking people to come back to work. And here are some of the main findings. So this is based on over 1,000 corporate decision makers, so it's quite a large sample size. And for all of them, almost all of them, over 90%, they believe companies, they will ask their employees come back to work, return to office by 2024. And 28% of them says they will threaten employees. If they don't come back, you leave. And only 2% says they probably would not require employees to return to work in person. So that kind of shows the attitudes. I'm not sure if you guys experience the same trends here. And meantime, 83% says return to office policies will improve worker productivity. So that's probably why most of them want people to come back. And 81% said the return to the office policy will increase revenues, and 81 believe it will bring up a better, more positive, more engaging, more connected workplace culture. So apparently, there's no one-size-fits-all solutions. Even though there are so many promising benefits as for the return to the office policies, but also people may not feel happy about it. Not everyone feel happy about giving up the options to having the flexibility of work. And I already saw some of our participants, they are shaking their hands. They don't want to really return to the office. They don't want to kind of have to do it. They want to have the options. But also for some types of the workplaces, you have to have that interconnected relationships across the team with your team members. So when there's no one size fits all, here is when our internal communication professionals should step in to better communicate whatever decisions your organization is making. And at the same time, you need to be intentional and deliberate when you deliver the messages, because you have to factor into your employees' situations, into your decision making. You have to think about what are their needs, what are their expectations, what is their full employee experience. Even though we cannot make everyone happy, but with better or more strategic or more effective communication strategies, you can make the employee experience better, more positive. At least they are more able or willing to adapt to the transformations. And now I want to share some research findings, some implications, mostly based on the research across different research methods. So some of the research here are based on my quantitative survey research, which is about fully remote employees, and that research is collaborated with my mentor, Dr. Marcia Distazo over there. So that study, we surveyed over 500 full-time remote employees during the end of 2021. And we asked about all their perceptions about doing remote work, their perceptions about internal communication, and their perceptions of the sense of engagement, the sense of feeling being supported at work. And recently, me and the Internal Research Communication Hub, also at University of Florida, directed by Dr. Rita Mann, we recently conducted a qualitative interview research, interviewing. Now we have 22 data interviews. And all of those interviewees, they are senior or top-level communication professionals across different industries in the US. And within that research, part of the questions we are asking, as the CCO level, how do you communicate all the transformations when you have to make some decisions, and when you are not sure if that decision can make everyone happy? How would you communicate that part? And based on the both quantitative and the qualitative research, here are some thoughts that I would like to share that I think can be applied well in the times of transformation, but also many of them should be followed even at normal days. So the number one thing I want to emphasize is about transparency and authenticities. So this is almost like the most common themes emerged from the both the interview study and my quantitative survey research. So people want to say, okay, I know there's going to be a change, but I don't want to be the last one to know this is the change. I'm just that informed from the directors out of nowhere. You want to let people get involved in the process as early as you can, as most transparently as you can. And that sense of being involved in the change can make people feel more willing to accept the changes, and also show your empathy. Even though not every time you are communicating positive news or good news, there are gotta be sometimes you have to share some bad news or negative news. But the way you communicate matters. Even though you are saying bye to your employees, the way you say that matters. You want to show empathy, you want to show care, you want to show this decision was made because of what, and you want to make that process as early as you can, as transparent as you can, as authentic as you can. Okay, number two, which is about two-way communication, and most importantly, about listening. This is a very core component of internal communication, especially during the times of transformation, or to be more specific, when you are dealing with the challenging times. Listen to your employees. You want to provide the channels for them to freely share their concerns, share their thoughts, share their problems. Probably, we don't have the capability to address every single concerns or questions. Back to our earlier points, there's no one-size-fits-all. We cannot make everyone happy. But the process of listening itself can make people feel appreciated, can make people feel, oh, their voice are valued or being heard by the leaders, by the top leaders, not just from the supervisors, but also across the internal communication system. Their voices matters. Two-way communication and listening matters more. And also, from my survey research, I want to ask this to you guys. Compare between supervisory listening versus corporate internal listening. So the listening process you get from the communication departments. Which one do you think is more important for remote employees to feel they are being connected to their companies when they are working remotely? Which one do you think is more important? They are both important for sure. Which one is more important? What do you think? Supervisory? Exactly, supervisory. And the significance is statistically different. So even though both are important, but when people are fully remote work, they rely more on their supervisors to give them feedback, to provide them guidance, to listen to their concerns and problems, to help them. So two-way communication, listening, and most importantly, that falls under the supervisor's responsibility. And the next thing is about conscious communications. So when you create any communication, when you are delivering any messages, create a communication campaign, you want to really think about where are your employees? What are their current situations? Where are they? Where are them? What are their needs? What do they want to listen? It's not just like you say what you want to say, but it's most likely you need to provide information they care the most. And depends on their capability, not your capability. Depends on your employees' capability. Maybe some of them are like frontline workers. They're not checking their email every day. So you got to think about the most appropriate communication channels to deliver your messages and also to reach out your employees in their situations. So be intentional and deliberate when you create your communication, when you deliver your messages. And last but not least, clear guidance and clear expectations. This is more like during those challenging times, provide the roadmap for the employees. Let them know what are the expectations on them. What can they expect it to happen in the next few years or in the next few months? That can reduce the feelings of confusions, the feelings of concerns, and the feelings of uncertainties. And when you reduce all those kind of factors, you can tell people will feel more engaged at work. People will feel happier at work. And all of positive outcomes will come out of that if you are sharing those clear guidance to them. You are providing the step-by-step guidance to help them adapt to the transformation stages. And I want to point out that the effective or strategic communication efforts, it should be conducted across all different levels in your organizations. From the CEO level, they are like the top person. Of course, they matters. Then down to the direct supervisors, they're the number one, based on research, not I'm saying that, they are the most trustworthy resources that employees tend to rely on. So definitely supervisory communication matters. And also peer communication also matters. Because think about that, maybe you're talking with your peers the most. And when you're talking to your peers, you guys are not just like changing information, but you are sharing feelings. And that feelings, that emotions is contagious. And it can be both ways. It can be positive. If you are hearing inspiring stories from your peers, you will feel more motivated. If you're hearing negative, you are always hearing complaints from your peers, especially during the changes, the negative emotions can as contagious as it could be compared to the positive one. So for the CEO communication, you need to set a tone, explain the reasons behind the changes, why you need the changes, and explain that transparently and authentically. For the supervisor communication, as we said, supervisor listening matters, and you need to share the clear roadmap and directions for your employees to let them know what are they supposed to complete. Provide support, share resources, show up when the employees need you, because employees will rely on their direct supervisors the most for instructions, for guidance, for support, for help, for information. And lastly, peer communication. Build the sense of community, especially during the change. Don't make the employees feel like they're the only one who is struggling with all the changes and challenges and obstacles, they're not the only one. There is a sense of community. Build that and use that as a strategy to express those positive emotions and take advantage of the positive contagious emotions to motivate people, to make people feel more passionate, more positive towards the changes. And eventually, all has to be conducted in a more strategic tactics way. And based on our interviews, here are some common tactics that emerged from people's sharings. And I kind of picked some of them that I think are most important, if not the top one. They are all very important during the times of transformation. So first, town hall meetings. That the number one themes that people mention the most regarding how can you make people feel better when they are dealing with all the challenges and changes. But I understand, given the different situations of the organizations and different conditions of the employees, maybe in-person town hall meetings is not always possible, but the whole ideas behind that is, as the top leaders, you need to build the direct communication and interactions with your employees. If in-person doesn't really work, then have a virtual format, or even like posting the video, you need to have a certain format or channels or venues to directly communicate and interact and listen to your followers. Regular check-ins, and that falls most under the direct supervisors. So you want to directly check in with your employees to see how's their going, is there any problems, you need to listen to their concerns. And interactive internet. So the ideas behind the internet is you need to have a platform where people can keep updated with all the organization related information. So the internet here doesn't have to be a website. It could be an app, or it could be some other formats. And the main idea is keep people updated. And also, one thing that I think can be more applicable is think about how can you tell more inspiring stories on those platforms. The stories can from the employees, came from the leaders, but also came from the consumers, came from the communities. And the ideas behind those story sharing is you want to use those inspiring stories to make people feel more passionate about the work they're doing, to make them be aligned with the organizational purpose. And those inspiring story sharing can be a very strategic way to do so, because it's more vivid, it can be more colorful. It's not like the dry content from the communication department. It's dry, right? People love reading stories, so storytelling content could be very effective on those channels. And multi-channel communication, that also ties back to our earlier discussion regarding be intentional and deliberate when you deliver messages. So think about your employees' situations, and based on their needs, you need to pick the most appropriate channel for them. And last but not least, appropriate use of the emerging technologies. So even though we are feeling the benefits of using those emerging technologies, but the overuse or the inappropriate use of those emerging technology can cause burdensome. It might cause, it is a double-edged sword. If you use it strategically, it can be a way to make your life easier. Otherwise, people will just spend more efforts trying to get used to all the different channels and platforms. And again, it always needs to back to your employees' capabilities. Do they have the skills to navigate all those fancy media? So that kind of wrap up my presentation today. Hopefully I'm not going too over. And I want to point out those lists are not exhaustive by any means, but I want to just point out those as the examples to showcase you guys the strategies, the different levels of communications, as well as the internal communication specific tactics. They should all be tied together when you create the messages and deliver the messages. They should be an integrated process, not separately, not on the silo stage. All right, so thank you so much for your listening. you.